The Autumn Park scene was created to demonstrate the powerful features of Forest Color, Forest Pack's texture map plugin that enables you to easily randomize color and textures on forest items. This accompanying tutorial is going to illustrate how to use Forest Color to create the texture variations seen here on the leaves and the trees, the leaves on the ground, and on the grass. In doing so, this tutorial is going to cover a number of important principles: how to tint maps by randomly selecting colors from a gradient or source bitmap, how to add variety by randomly applying bitmaps to forest items, how to control the probability of a bitmap actually being selected, and how to use randomise by element and randomise by item for Forest Pro users only. To get started, download the starter file from the ITOOSOFT website. These files are identical to the finished Autumn Parks scene, except that the forest colour maps have yet to be applied to the materials. If we have a quick look at the scene, we can see there are only 6 forest objects, in addition to the benches, the bins and the ground. There's one forest object which covers all of the grass. There's 2 for the dried leaves. One covers the main bulk of them on the ground, and the other one, this little patch here, on the bench. Then there's the trees, which are split into 3 forests. You have the main bulk of them, which is most of what you can see in the scene. You've got some trees on the horizon, which are slightly lower on the Z-axis to give the impression of land falling away. And then you've got a couple of trees at the front, which have been separated out so that their position and rotation can be precisely controlled, since they're closest to the camera. So we're going to get started by creating some new forest colour maps for the grass. There's 2 ways of adding these. We can either do it manually in the material editor, or we can let the forest object automatically apply them by going to the material rollout and using the optimize materials tool. We'll get into that a little bit later, and for now we'll just do it manually. So if you open up the material editor, you should have your grass object. We already have 2 bitmaps in place, and we'll continue to use those, but we need to put a forest colour map just in between. So let's do that by right clicking, going to Maps, Standard, and finding your forest colour, and clicking to add one of those into the scene. Now this is going to plug straight into the diffuse map slot there, and then we will plug the existing bitmap into the first slot, which when you connect it up it will say default. And if you were to render this now, nothing would actually have changed. If we just open up the forest colour settings, we can see this bitmap goes into the default slot here. But you also have 10 additional slots underneath, and so you can plug another 10 bitmaps into here, and Forest Colour will randomise the selection and application of those onto your forest items. You also have a tint override at the bottom here, which allows you to add a colour overlay in addition to these maps. So with these 2 working together, you can get an almost unlimited colour variation. Let's load in some other bitmaps to apply to this. So we want grass leaf illumine. I'll just drag these in. Grass leaf brown. Should mention there's a list of these on the website, so if this is going too fast in the video, you can simply look them up. Grass leaf grey. Just standard grass leaf. And then illumine 2. So we now have a total of 6 bitmaps, and these can be plugged into these map slots. So I'm just going to drag these over. It's important to realise these say empty, so these map slots, as you see them here, 1 to 10, start from the 3rd slot down on the forest colour node. Let's just plug these in. Okay, so you can now see this reflected here. You now have 6 maps applied, or actually 5, because this map isn't currently a part of the randomization. I also need to take that and plug that into one of the map slots. This default slot is used in the event that this material is applied to a non-forest object, or if all of these maps are turned off, which actually they currently are. So let's turn these on by clicking on the little tick buttons next to them. You'll see they light up. Great, so what's happening now is when we render this, it will randomly select one of these 6 bitmaps and apply it to the object. Now it applies in a couple of ways. You can apply it to the item or to the element. If you apply it to the item, the same bitmap will be applied to each tree, but will vary between trees. And if you apply it to the element, each leaf will take a different bitmap, which will give you more variety per tree. This is a feature which is only available to pro users. Item is on by default. I'm going to set it to element in this case. Now also, each of these different maps has the same chance of being selected, but this can be changed with the probability settings down here on the right hand side. So for example, the default map that we put in there, we perhaps want that to be selected more often than the others. So we could control that by looking for its map slot here and changing the probability to 40%. And then we'll just go through and add some other probabilities to these. So the illumine one, let's change that to 20 and 20, 10, and then we don't want this one to be selected very often, so let's change this to 5. And I've missed one there, let's change that to 20. And that one to 5. Okay. So that's great, those are ready to go. But we can add another, as I say, we can add another level of randomization by turning on tint. Now tint can be added in two ways. You can add it here from the material, or if we go back to the forest object into the material settings, you can apply it globally from here too. They're the same settings more or less for the basic tint. The difference is if you had more than one object in your forest and you turned this on here, it would apply equally to every single object. Whereas if you wanted a different tint setting for each individual object, each individual material on the object, then you could do it from the forest color. So we'll do it from here because we're going to want a different tint setting on the front of the grass from the back. So we'll stick to the material editor. So let's open up forest color, let's come into here and turn on override to activate it. Now here you've got a random strength, which is how much this color, which is going to get randomly picked from somewhere on this gradient, mixes with these maps that we've added up here. 100 to 100 means it will be 100% this color, so let's tone that down a little bit and change the strength to 0 to 50%. And let's change the gradient settings a little too. So let's go RGB value 0, 120, 0. And then the end of the gradient, let's go for 255, 119, 0. So kind of a green to an orange tone. And then in variation here, you have the ability, just like with element and item, to vary this between the item and the element here. And this is a kind of a sliding scale between the two. I'm going to put it sort of smack in the middle for now, 50% blend between the two. So let's move on to the back. We've got the bitmap here again. Let's just right click maps, standard, forest color, and just drop the default map into the first slot there and connect the color to the diffuse. Okay, and in this case we'll just bring in one more texture and we'll use this one that's already selected, grass leaf illumine 2. Actually let's go for that one, illumine 1. That was illumine 2 already, my confusion. Let's add this to the first map slot, third one down remember, double click on forest color and make sure you activate it. And then don't forget also to add the default map into one of the other map slots too, so it becomes a part of the randomization, and turn that on. And in this case we will turn the default one to 5%, so illumine 2 to 5%, and the one we just imported to 20. It's important to realise that these are normalised, so you don't need to add these up to 100%. The plugin does that for you behind the scenes. It's a nice intuitive way of working. So with that done, we're now ready to render. Let's close this down and bring up the render settings. Okay, I'm going to pause the video while this renders, and I'll show you a before and after when it's finished. Okay, so that's done, and here we've got the before render, and then we have an after. So you can see that's added a tremendous amount of variation to those individual leaves, and you're really going to see that in the scene. Okay, so the next one to move on to is the dried leaves that are on the ground. We'll look at that one next, and it's following a very similar process. So let's get started. Let's open the material editor again. And I'm just going to clear all this out the way to make things easier to see. We want to find the leaf dry and drag that in as an instance and hit OK. So we have our leaf set up. As with the grass, two-sided material for V-Ray, V-Ray standard back, V-Ray standard front. And again, let's right click, go to Maps, Standard, Forest Color. Connect this to the default, and this one to the diffuse. Now we want to bring in some extra bitmaps. So leaf dry is already in there. We want leaf dry brown. Which is there. And then leaf maple 3 to 6. So leaf maple 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then just like before, connect these up to the appropriate slots. And don't forget to include the default in one of those slots, in addition to in the default map slot. Okay, let's double click on that to bring up the probability settings. And we just want to change a few of these so that it favours the browner leaves. These are the leaves that have fallen off the trees and are dying, so we don't want too many that are green. Okay, so let's start with the default one first, which is plugged in the default slot here, and also in the final one, the 6th here. So this is very brown, and we're going to want to see this one more than most, so let's go for 75%. And then this map here, very rich, let's not have too much of that. Or that one. 5% for that one too. And then we'll add a little bit more probability for these two, so let's go for 10 and 5 for that one maybe actually. Okay, so 5, 5, 5, 10, 5, 75. Yes, so you can see there the probability that we're mostly applying this map, with the others fairly evenly balanced out with map 4, this one, having slightly more chance of appearing. We also want to add a bit of tint to this, so let's override the tint again. The strength we will keep quite subtle, so 0 this time to 25, so it's not having so much of an effect, and you'll see why in a second. And then we'll change the tint gradient so that the colour is 0, 1, 3, 5, and 0. And this one here is going to be 2, 5, 5, 0, 0. A very, very deep red. So you can see why the random strength is quite low, because if this were applied too strongly, you'd have bright red leaves. So now we'll do the back of the leaves, and it's the same setup again. We have a bitmap here already, so let's drag this out, Maps, Standard, and Forest Color. and put that into the first map slot. And then let's drag the forest color map into the diffuse slot and duplicate the default into the first of the map slots. If we double click, we can see what's going on there. Now we'll bring in some extra textures, so back to here. We will bring in leaf maple green, which is here, and also leaf dry sat. So leaf dry saturated. Let's bring those in and connect those up to the slots too. Next two. Now we're going to want to see the default map more possibly than these two on the back, so we'll double click here, activate these maps, and turn this to about 50%, maple green to about 30%, and leaf dry saturated to 20%. If we do a render now, so we can see this, and we'll do a before and after again. I'm going to pause this while it renders and then show you what it looks like when it's finished. Okay, so that's done, and this is the start before we'd applied forest color. And if I sweep this across here now, you can start to see those leaves on the ground. Nothing else. This is just the leaves we're looking at here. Those leaves on the ground have all taken on slightly different hues and variations in their mapping. It adds a lot more variety, and you can see in the background as well across here, it adds a lot more subtle realism. So the next material we'll focus on will be the trees, the leaves in the trees, and I'll just demonstrate on this one a slightly different setup. We'll look at the mental ray setup instead of V-ray because it differs just ever so slightly. Okay, so I've switched the material over in the trees to a mental ray material so we can demonstrate the slightly different setup. And also we're going to apply the forest colours in a slightly different way too. So first of all, let's pick the trees. Any of the trees are fine. And we're going to add the forest colour using optimized materials, which is a part of the material rollout. In fact, it's right at the bottom of it. If we click on this little button here, it brings up the material optimizer settings, and it's automatically detected the render engine that I currently have active, and normally that would be on, and it will automatically convert any standard materials you've got on your objects to V-ray or mental ray. It's going to apply forest color to diffuse maps, which we want, and it can exclude materials using certain names. So if you have named your materials correctly, and they're called trunk or bark, where you might not want randomization or a forest map, then you can exclude them using that there. All the manual the default settings are fine, so let's just hit optimize. It's going to warn me, I can accept that. Okay, so that's done. Now if I open up the material editor, this is our forest material, tree material I should say, and if I come down here you can see what it's done is automatically added a forest color map here between the bitmap and the architecture and design material, which is what I've been doing manually in the last two examples. So this is a great time saver. And you can see the difference here. We mentioned it earlier, but in this case this bitmap would have been plugged into the refraction color map and also the surface material there. Now actually we want this to take place of these bitmaps. It hasn't automatically done that for me, so I need to plug that into refraction color map there, and also down here to the surface material. Okay, so now you can see this surface this forest color is now in all the places where this bitmap would have been in originally. Now let's add some bitmaps to that. So back to our files, let's just neaten this up a little bit. Back to our files, and this time we want leaf dry saturated again. We want maple 1, which is actually this one here, it's already in here. We want maple 2, maple 3, maple 4 and maple 5. And same as always, let's just plug these in. To the forest colour. Okay, so double click on your forest colour if you haven't done so or missed one, and set your probability. So activate the maps and set your probabilities. So we have leaf dry saturated, let's give that 40%, leaf maple 1, which is the default, 15%, maple 2 5%, maple 3 15%, maple 4 15%, and maple 5 10. And as before, let's add another layer of randomization by turning on override on the tint. Let's set the random strength this time so 15 to 75%. So stronger this time, and there's never going to be a point at which the tint isn't applied because we start on 15 instead of 0. And then we'll add some colour. So let's go 0, 95, 0, kind of a rich green, and 207, 64, 0, kind of orange colour. And hit OK. So now we'll render this whole scene so we can see the effect of these three forest new forest colour materials on the scene, and you can see a very clear before and after. Okay, so here we have the final renders. This is the render without forest colour on any of the objects. You can see it still has some variety because of the trees, but really all the leaves are the same, the grass is the same, and the dry leaves are the same. Now if we start doing comparison, we can see the tremendous variety that the forest colour maps we just added have given this scene. The most obvious is obviously up in the trees, but everywhere there's subtle changes in the grass, in the leaves on the ground. As always, if you've got any more questions, then please ask in the forums. And if you want to see some more tutorials, please visit the tutorial section for the Forest Pack Pro part of the website, or check out ITOOSOFT channel on Vimeo and on YouTube.